What's up, guys? It's the Waggish American here, and I am bringing you another model build. So if you look back at my channel, I've been doing a lot of smaller or single engine builds, and I've got a couple large aircraft to do, a couple very large Sherman bombers, and then of course the Tamiya 32nd Scale 0. So I'm starting this project to practice airbrushing larger surfaces. Today I'm going to be building Academy's 1/72nd scale Boeing B-17b in its Pearl Harbor colors, which is, I think, a very pretty airplane. Doesn't have the gruff muscle and fighting capability that the later ones have, which are bristling with guns, but I think it's a very beautiful looking airplane. Would have made a very nice looking airliner at the time. First off, before I get into it, just the amazing box art. Nothing really besides that. Just look at that amazing box art. This is going to get turned into a poster on my wall when I'm done with this build. Opening it up, I have cut a couple parts off just because I was bored and waiting for paint to dry, so I screwed around with some stuff. The clear parts are strange. Most of the molded clear parts, like these and the actual windscreen, what you could call the cockpit arrangement, is very nicely molded. However, I don't know if this will come up on camera, but every single one of these smaller windows has like drips raised fairly far out of it, and it completely warps them. So I'm going to have to be using some crystal clear to deal with that. Instruction booklet. It's very short. It's a very small booklet, especially for something that you'd think would be as large as a B-17. It's just 2 pages, and it's very simple, very clearly laid out. They use numbers for the paints instead of letters, which is nice, and they do provide you with plenty of excellent reference pictures. Now, one big problem with this kit, the lack of interior detail on certain parts. I'm not going to go crazy detailing this thing. I am going to just put in like basics like floors and maybe a little bit of ribs in some of the areas like around the waist gunners, because it's a cavern. There's nothing there. Decals. Academy does not have a great reputation, and that's because their decals tend to stink. So anywhere I can choose to not use a decal, I'm going to paint instead. Like I can tell you right now, this rudder, it's going to be airbrushed, and these de-icer boots are going to be airbrushed, and the anti-glare panel is going to be airbrushed. Now on to the only thing I really removed, and I really wanted to talk about, the fuselage halves. Just looking at them, they look very nicely molded, very little flash. Nice panel lines, recessed of course, but here's the thing, they don't fit. If you put the 2 alignment pins in the holes, close them up just perfectly, that's what the fit is. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed. So what you've got to do is like squeeze the right fuselage half into place and then hold it and hope your glue sits strong enough, which is a pretty big letdown, to be honest. Going through the other parts, there's basically no flash, no really lost detail, but there wasn't really any detail to begin with. Overall, everything looks pretty good. Typical in my experience, Academy. Could have used a bit more detail. The bomb bay looks very well detailed. Just parts of the fuselage are going to get reworked. This is mostly just engine and small detail stuff. The engines are displayed very nicely. I like the way the wheels have a very realistic amount of sag to them. And then you have the largest sprue, the wings. Not really anything to say about these. They're warp free, which is nice. Take note, Revel. You guys don't get that reference, but you will in an upcoming video, probably 2 or 3 videos out from now. There's actually a lot of detail on the wings, and I'm very happy with how these were done. And that's all my thoughts on the kit itself. I'm going to go get started building, and I will see you guys at the cockpit. Bye. I began the build by constructing the kit-provided interior. There was not a whole lot of detail on anything, but there also wasn't a lot of flash or cleanup that needed to be done. Here I am removing all the parts. These will later be painted with Tamiya XF4 Yellow Green, which I find a fairly decent substitute for interior green. After filling and sanding the ejector pin marks, I attached all cockpit parts together using Tamiya extra thin cement. I really like this cement and will probably use it for everything. Save hard attachments such as landing gear, for which I tend to use super glue. One important thing to note about extra thin cement, I see a lot of new people do this. Don't brush it along seams. That actually creates more cleanup. What you want to do is have a very small gap, and then put a dot of it on the seam, and then press the seam closed. Capillary action will whisk the entire bit of glue all the way down the seam. You hold it for 20-30 seconds, and the entire thing is glued. It works very well. This was my first time that I really used Tamiya acrylics in my airbrush. I found that a mix of 7 parts paint to 3.25 parts thinner works pretty well. After I had painted the base colors, I gave the control panel a coat of flat black. I then covered it with Future. Once the Future had dried, I used Micro Set and I applied the decal. This was the first experience I've had with Academy decals in a while, and they were just as awful as I remember. It's basically a sticker. It does not conform at all and just snaps at tight bends. That was all that the kit gave you as far as detail. I actually scratch-built the radio compartment and a floor for the gunners. If you want to see more pictures of this process, I'll link to the Imager album down in the description. I'll also link to the finished wood tables. I found a new method on how to do these that I think is really helpful using oil paints. I'll link to that video in the description as well. Here I am assembling the stabilizers. Fit of these was pretty good, and it was like the one part I didn't have to clean up. The landing gear went on very interestingly. I wish that they would have designed the front end to be a bit more secure, but it ended up working out fine. Gluing the wings was quite a task. I know 48 skill guys are scoffing at this, but this is the largest wingspan plane I've done in a long while. And it was definitely a task using the extra thin to glue all this. I think this is one of the situations where using the normal thickness liquid glue would have been more helpful. Going through and doing this voiceover, I realized that apparently my editing was off, but here it shows some of the construction that went into building the radio compartment, and I believe some of the painting as well. I'm not quite sure how this mix-up got here, but I'll still link to the Imager album, because it has better close-ups of some things like the wood grain on the floor that I did. Now, the smaller windows in this model were the kind that you attach from the inside. I've had bad experience with these popping out with white glue, so I used a small brush and very carefully tapped the edges of these clear pieces with the thin liquid glue. This is very risky, but makes a very strong bond if you don't mess up your clear parts. Overall, the fit of these was actually okay, and it ended up working pretty well, except for the two windows on the top of the nose, which I had to make out of white glue. In hindsight, I should have waited till my crystal clear came in, but you can't really see any of the detail anyway. Painting the engines, I began by giving the whole thing a coat of Tamiya X11 chrome silver. I then painted specific details with flat black, and once that was dry, I painted the mounting ring around the outside, the yellow-green, and gave the whole thing, once the chrome had dried, since it's pretty much a gloss already, I ran over the whole thing with black panel line accent color, which really brought out the detail on the cylinders. Once construction and painting of the engines was completed, I attached them to the wing with thin cement. Due to how heavy this aircraft's wings ended up being, I elected to attach them with superglue as opposed to model glue. I really liked this and will pretty much do this from now on for large aircraft. Academy's decal reputation being what it is, I decided to paint the tail. I did a flat coat of white first, then masked and sprayed the red. I later masked again, and after another coat of primer, sprayed on the insignia blue. This ended up looking very nice and only needed 1 or 2 touch-ups. You can see here I am removing the masking, and all the work to make the stripes instantly becomes worth it. I used Vallejo Prussian blue for the insignia blue because I found it to be an almost exact match to the decal. Here I am removing the masking tape for the final time from the tail, revealing the result of all that work, and I think it looks fantastic. Once I had finished painting the cowlings, which I did not record because it was quite a task, I used white glue to secure the major glass pieces in place. I recorded here gluing the cockpit canopy itself in place, and I believe the radio compartment and some of the gun blisters. This worked very well, and surprising to me about this kit, all the clear parts fit exceptionally well. I went into it expecting that they wouldn't, and was pleasantly surprised when they did. On this build, I decided to try Vallejo's gloss black primer. I liked it a lot. It leveled very well, but in the future I will try thinning it I tried spraying it straight out of the bottle. I thought it was a bit too thick, and it solidified in the cup a little bit, which was troublesome because once I got to the wings, it started spitting. But other than that, it worked very well. Here, I recorded the painting process on one wing. This is using Vallejo's Model Air Silver. I didn't go for any fancy metal coats because I haven't gotten any of my metal colors in yet. My next metal airplane, I'm going to try a sort of natural metal finish with Vallejo's metal color, their acrylic metal color, aluminum and dark aluminum and silver. And everything I've seen about that line of paint has been very positive, so I'm excited to get to work with that. I let the paint sit for a very long time, and I figured it was glossy enough to just lay decals straight down on. I was right, and it ended up working very well, actually. I didn't have too many problems with the decals where a majority of it was clear, like the numbers, or the insignia. Those went on pretty well. I really like Academy's clear. It just went invisible as soon as it touched the plastic. The decals in this kit were a little bit out of register. If you look at the insignia, you can see a white line around about half the circle. It's very small, but it is unfortunately noticeable. Coming up ahead, when I move on to the underside of the right wing, I will try to put on a 3 blue band decal. I did not apply this in the smartest way, and it crinkled just a little bit and then basically ripped all over. And stuff like this is why I really don't like Academy decals. If it was Cartograph, you would have set it back in water, it would have straightened itself out. There were a couple more decals like this on this model, but I tried just, instead of trying to take them off and then apply them, I slid them off. Things such as the wing walk areas on the upper surfaces. I didn't really have too many problems. There were a couple breaks I had to patch up, but overall, this was the biggest problem I had with any decal. The upper surface version of this went on very nice. I didn't have to do any touch-ups on the upper surface, but just I did something wrong down here, and it fractured and was a pain to touch up in the end. While I waited for the decals to set, I worked on some other things. Here I am working on the tire and wheel assembly. I hand-painted the metal on these with Tester's metallic silver. I really like this for hand painting. I think it comes out very bright without any background. I prefer it over Tamiya's color. After applying primer, I painted that on, and then with Vallejo's flat black, I painted in the tires. In the future, I'm going to try using maybe a Tamiya's NATO black. It does not hand brush as nice, but I think it's a closer color to what the tires would actually be. Because if you look at tires on a real aircraft or car, it's really more of a very dark gray than a black. On this model, though, I didn't go for any weathering, so I don't think the distinction is really that important, and it came out looking fine. While still waiting for the decals to set, I painted up the turbochargers and glued them with a drop of CA to their places on the underside of the wing. I also glued in, I'm not quite sure what this is. It kind of looks like an exhaust pipe, but it doesn't really have an opening, so I'm not even going to try to guess what it is. I glued it in as well. At this point, I had already applied I airbrushed a coat of Future over the decals, and using a drop of super glue, I attached the wheels to the landing gear itself. While I had the CA out and the plane was flipped upside down, I went ahead and glued on the landing gear doors. I did not attach bombs, but there was decent detail, so I decided to leave the gear doors open. After applying light weathering with Tamiya Weathering Master Smoke, I used a couple drops of super glue to attach each propeller in place. I had some problems with the inboard propeller on the left wing because I could not get any of them to fit into the hole, and instead of resizing it, I just cut off the post, so I had to hold it on there for it to glue. But that's not a fault of the kit, that's a fault of me. The final piece of the model was gluing on the small bits like the radio hoop and some antenna. And here you go. This is the finished model. Overall, I really don't think I could recommend this kit to anyone. It's not that great of a kit. The fit on the fuselage is especially horrible. I wanted to show it on video, but apparently I misplaced those files. Unfortunately, there's not really a redeeming factor for this kit other than it's the only one really available in 72nd scale if you want this specific variant of the B-17. This is pretty much your only option. Now this kit can also be built into the the C variant, but that's a different boxing, and this kit does not come with decals for that. So if you want the C variant, you have to find that box. Despite not being a great kit, with a little bit of work, it can be turned into something nice, as I hope I've shown. But overall, if you were just looking for something to build and weren't specifically looking for this subject, I would have to say your money is better spent elsewhere. It was just a lot of hassle to get mostly the fuselage to work right, and that's not even the sections I modified. My fit problems were entirely in the kit cockpit area. I actually cut my other parts too small. Now, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the intro. I filmed that a while ago, almost a month now. But this project is... I don't usually build American aircraft, and this one is big and very American. So this is my 4th of July build. I've affixed it to this nice, well, not affixed, but it's sitting on this nice American flag display base. So, happy 4th of July. Thank you to all our service members. Happy Independence Day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.